everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you a 8x8 mixed media canvas that I made for my best friend for her birthday. So I started out with a regular old canvas. I didn't put any gesso on it or anything. It comes pre-gessoed, and I'm using Liquitex matte gel medium to apply some neutral color collage just for pattern and texture. I've got some tissue paper that has printing on it. I've got book text. Actually, I think that's a dictionary. I've got some map pieces. I've got some homemade paper with some Asian writing on it. I've even got some Asian writing newspaper. I've got old music paper. I've got all that type of stuff that's very neutral colored to start out with, and I'm just applying these. I also have a couple of things that I printed for some reason on my printer, like this sunshine that I thought was cool, sunshine illustration. And then I think these flowers, I think I drew them. I'm not sure. But anyway, these were things from my box of what I call black and white scraps. And I'm starting out with real neutral colors, but I know that I'm going to move on into some more warmer colors because my best friend's favorite color is red. And so I want to make sure that there's a lot of reds in this composition. This project took me probably 3.5 hours maybe to complete from start to finish. And so a lot of this is really sped up, trying to cram it down and crunch it into 20 minutes, which I think I got it into about 25 maybe by the time I'm done. But that includes pictures and stuff. So yeah, I started adding some reds and pinks and oranges that are different scraps from a different color box. I have these boxes of scraps sorted into plastic boxes by color. So those were from different boxes. I think some of it was inky paper, some of it was gel print with the stencil, that type of stuff. So then the next thing I did was to add some more contrasting texture. This is all visual texture, it's not physical texture yet. But I'm using a Memento Tuxedo Black permanent ink pad and stamping on some textural circle images and then eventually some numbers. I think numbers are interesting in the background. So I'm making a very busy background to start out with using different techniques. So then now I'm going to put some stenciling on. So I'm adding some paint to my palette. I have a dark red, a medium red, a fluorescent pink, some kind of dark orange, and some white. And I will list all the colors I used in links in the description box below the video. So if you go down there and you click more, you'll see a whole big list of all the products used on this project with links to where you can purchase them. This is a Stencilgirl stencil, and so I don't know which one it is, but I will look it up and I will link that as well. It has a lot of different flowers on it. It's also got some kind of mark making type looking dashes and dots and things like that. And I'm just sort of using the stencil and these different colors to kind of unify everything. Now we're not with the black and white anymore. That was kind of the first layer. Now we're going in with some colors as like the second layer. Trying to go with reds, pinks, oranges, those type of very warm colors. I am going to put a contrasting color on here pretty soon. That would be this phthalo green-blue paint. And I'm just going to use some of the leafy vine type looking stuff from the stencil, all using the same stencil and just using pieces and parts of it rather than laying it down and, trying to stencil the entire thing. I'm just using bits and bobs, the leaves and the fern looking things to add a contrasting color, which is the green-blue, phthalo green-blue. And I'm mixing it with some white at times. I have some white gesso on my palette, so I'm just kind of mixing it to lighten it up and just make it more interesting. Now I have a piece of deli paper. This is a lightweight paper, like a tissue paper, but a lot more sturdy. You can write on it, erase, cut it, tear it, that type of stuff. And it's what's used to wrap up sandwiches in a restaurant, or to put in the bottom of a fish and chips basket. It's kind of a lightly waxed paper, but it's translucent and it's sturdy. So I've drawn my two figures on here and kind of decided how they're positioned and how their faces are. And then I cut out just the face portions and I'm going to collage those on to the background. The pencil that I used to do this was a Stabilo all graphite pencil, and it's a little bit too water reactive, and as I'm collaging these pieces on, I kind of lose the left one's nose a little bit, but there's enough there for me to pick it back up with the pencil again. And I cut them out and then I laid that background down so that I could get my positioning correct. And then now I've cut their hair out in the same way and I'm drawing around it to get the hair positioned the way I wanted it. So that's kind of a cheat way, hacked way to get your images onto the canvas in the way that you want them without, really going crazy and doing tracing paper or transfers or anything like that. Just a simple way to get it on there. Next, I have some white gesso on my palette, and I'm going to mix that with a little bit of a type of an ultramarine blue. And I just want to make a light blue. I want to make like a, I don't know, sky blue type color. So I didn't have that color, so I just decided to mix it with white gesso. And I'm going to paint around the outsides of the hair so that the figures, it's reverse painting or, something like that, to make the figure stand out from the background and to kind of dull down the background. But I don't want to completely obliterate it. I like the pattern and the shapes and all that stuff that I built up to be there. I don't want to obliterate it, but I want to calm it down. So I paint that mixture on and then kind of wipe it back a little bit with a wet baby wipe so that my figures are coming to the forefront. And then I'm also using some of that white gesso to kind of paint over a first layer onto the faces of my figures to give it kind of some tooth so that I can continue to paint layers over it to make their skin. Then I decided I want a little bit of texture paste at the bottom of the canvas with these flowers again from the Stencil. So this is Golden Light Modeling Paste. I like this one just because it dries quickly. I can even dry it with my heat tool without much problem. And I'm stenciling that on using a metal palette knife, but then it didn't do so well in some areas. So I have this silicone tipped brush that I'm using to go around and kind of clean up my stenciling and make sure that it's not, that doesn't have the texture in between the lines and stuff like that. So I have a sunflower on one side, a rose on the other, and then I just kind of do some random flower shapes in the middle with some leaves to fill it up. And that does have, it has a feeling when you can run your hands over it and you can feel that texture. Then I put a little flower in the one girl's hair to kind of balance the composition because it seemed like it was a little bit off. And I even eventually do something more with that. I add a cat because I decide that two figures aren't really balanced for a composition. It just kind of was bothering me still that there need to be something more on that left side. So then I start to build up the skin tones. I started with the white gesso. Now I'm putting on unbleached titanium. Some people might call it buff titanium on the right-hand girl, and portrait pink on the left-hand girl, mixed with a little bit of white because it's just a little bit too pink for me. And getting a foundation layer. I'm putting some foundation on them. Here's where I draw in the little kitty cat. My best friend really likes cats. She has two very adorable cats. So I thought a cat would be appropriate to put in here as well, just to add something extra. So I drew that with the same Stabilo graphite pencil and put some white gesso on it to start out with. So now I'm starting to add more colors. I've got my Neocolor 2 water-soluble crayons. These are very water-soluble. These are the best water-soluble crayon type product, in my opinion. I love these. If I had to pick something to take with me to an island, a deserted island, and I only had, you know, 3 art supplies or something. I mean, you play that game, people ask, what would your top 3 be? Neocolors would be in the top because there's so much color variation there. You can have a lot of different choices and you can use them in a lot of different ways. I have a Pentel water tank brush and I have some titanium white, or it might still, no, I guess it's still just some white gesso. It's not titanium white, it's just white gesso on my palette. And I pick that up with my water tank brush bristles when I'm blending the Neocolor, and that makes it more permanent. Neocolor is a water-soluble product, so it's not permanent. This whole canvas will be given 3 coats of sealer before I ever send it away. So it is all going to be sealed in anyway, but it helps to blend and to kind of more permanentize the Neocolor if you blend it with a little bit of an acrylic product on a water brush. And to get a realistic skin tone, you're really going to be going over it several times. You'll see me go back and highlight and shadow several different times with different colors, and it just kind of gives it more depth. So it's a process. Doing these whimsical faces is a process. These are not in any way intended to be realistic. They're not intending to be a certain person or a caricature, anything like that. They're just faces, whimsical faces. People's eyes aren't usually that big. Their noses aren't that small, and they don't usually have that pouty of lips. It's a style. It's a popular style. So I'm adding a little bit of blue as a shading color. Sometimes I add a little bit of purple as a shading color. I've got the terracotta color. I just keep going back and forth and adding color and then blending, letting it dry a little bit, add some more color, blend, let it dry some more, maybe even dry it with a heat tool like I am right now. Going back in, adding some more graphite and blending that. That Stabilo All pencil is also highly water reactive, so I can blend it in as well with the water. And bringing the features back out, going back in, blending in again, adding more color. It's just a process. It's something that kind of have to play with and practice with and mess around with on your own. Sometimes I have to kind of adjust the shapes because the shapes are getting a little bit of weirdness to them because it started out that I kind of erased the shapes with the matte medium at the very beginning, and then I had to redraw them in. Then I had to, and if you think things need to be adjusted, you can always go back over it with a little bit of white and readjust it, let it dry. I was thinking that the nose was too short on the right hand girl, so I kind of obliterate it and redraw it. It's not something that I can tell you step 1, do this, step 2, do this. It's just back and forth, blending, adding color, reshaping, blending, adding color, back and forth, until you get it the way you want it. And that process of doing the faces takes longer than anything else. The collage, that's pretty quick. The drawing, not too bad. But this trying to add colors to the skin and get everything blended is the longest process on this. Adding the shadows, adding the highlights, on all the figures. My cat too. I have to go keep adding more to my cat, then letting it dry. So if you hop around on your canvas from one place to another, you can get more done. because you can't continue to work something over and over and over. It has to dry in between. It just has to. So I want the skin tones to be different. I don't want them exactly the same because no two people have the same skin tone. It could be close, but I want to make sure that there's a differentiation between the two figures on the canvas. Now I'm coloring in some of my texture paste at the bottom with the Neo colors. There's a couple different ways you can use them. You can draw them directly onto things, or you can draw them onto your palette or your scratch paper and then pick up that color with your water brush or your paintbrush, whichever you're using. So I'm kind of doing both, trying to get some color on these pieces. And again, I'm going to seal that, so it's okay that it's a water-soluble product. I'm going to be spraying it and getting everything sealed, so I'm not too worried about that. So then I want to do a little bit of dripping. This is Golden High Flow acrylic paint. This is a thin paint, but has a ton of pigment. If you take some acrylic paint and you water it down, if you water it down too much, the stick-to-itiveness of the paint goes away and it starts to flake when it's dry. And also, you lose pigment load. If it's an inexpensive paint, there's not enough pigment in there to really support you mixing a ton of water. So if you want to do dripping, it's a good idea to go with like an acrylic ink or a thinned acrylic paint like Golden High Flow. So that's what this is. I'm adding it on there, spraying it with water and letting it drip through the texture. And then I also did, to balance everything out, I did some at the top as well. Trying not to get it on the faces if I can manage. And I have a wet baby wipe to clean it up as I'm going to make sure that that blue color doesn't get on the faces. But I do want it down in the cracks and crevices of the texture for sure, because I want that dark to show through so that the colors and shapes will be more visible. If you're enjoying this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment or question below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on your notification bells if you want to know when a new fresh video comes. And of course, you can share this or pin it on Pinterest or something like that if you'd like to. Coming back in with more layers on the face. I leave this stuff in even though it's highly sped up so that you can really see the process. If you really want to watch and pay attention to how many layers go on skin tone to try to make it look somewhat luminous and dewy complexion, it takes a lot of layers. A lot of layers. So I just continue to do that. I'm starting to add in some color to the eyes and letting it dry. One girl has brown eyes, one girl has blue eyes. My best friend has brown eyes. I have blue eyes. Highlights and color on the lips. It's fun to do this. It takes a lot of time though. Still blending my crayon colors with some white gesso and my water brush. So it's like just a very thin little bit of white gesso on the brush, and then it helps me to blend and kind of make more permanent the water soluble product of the Neocolor 2 crayons. Making sure that the forehead, the nose, and the chin have highlight and that there's shadows in the areas around the eye because that's where, it sinks in. Any place that sticks out on your face is where the highlights go. Any place that sinks in, like under your cheekbones, under your neck, under your lip, under your nose, around your eyes, those are where the shadows go. Still couldn't decide what color I wanted my cat. At first I thought it might be a gray striped cat, then I thought it might be kind of like a brownish striped cat, or maybe it's just a completely white cat. I couldn't make up my mind. Adding in some more darkness in between the flower petals to get those to stand out a little bit more. Adding some splatters. I like splatters on a mixed media project. Makes me happy. And then once I gave that a really good dry, I'm going to go ahead and do some uh, lines, illustration work with the Faber-Castell Pit Artist pins. These come in a set with several different widths of pen nib, and you can, vary your widths of pen nib to make your illustration look a little bit more interesting. So that's why there's a lot of different sizes in the pack. But they are India ink, and so they are permanent. So you can draw your lines in if you would like to do some types of illustration, which I enjoy. I enjoy lines. I can't get over it. So, what was I about to say before I distracted myself? I can't remember. Yeah, I'm using black. I think that what I really want to get is some gray toned illustration pens. I hear they exist, and hopefully they are India ink or something like that. I don't really like pigment ink in a pen. I prefer the India ink. It dries quickly, it's permanent, and it won't, when I go to spray this, it won't run or bleed or anything like that. And I did add 3 coats of sealer, spray sealer in a matte finish to this project. So I do that outside. It's too stinky. Adding pupils to the eyes, eyelashes, things like that. All the good stuff. And then my final touch will be to come in with a white Posca pen, which is a acrylic paint pen. It has the properties of acrylic, so when it's dry, it's opaque and permanent. And I can add some highlights in different areas to just kind of finish up. Both on the faces, on the cat, and also in the flowers. Adding some more graphite. Just back and forth, what I think it needs until I'm happy with it. Until you're happy. Just do it until you're happy. My very last thing to do was to write best friends in my own handwriting, my own evil handwriting, up at the top. And then that was it. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you have. There we go. Best friends. I wrote it in pencil first. There's probably not too many ways I could misspell best friends, but let me tell you, I could do it. I'm not good at spelling things correctly when I'm in the artistic process. So the close-up photos are coming up. Enjoy those, and that's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.